Welcome to the Adventure Island podcast hosted by Ballyhass, a podcast where we dive into this week's outdoor news, look at why we should all be getting active outdoors, providing inspiration for outdoor adventures, travel destinations, fringe outdoor sports and local destinations and characters. This podcast is released every Friday following our newsletter on Thursday. Please sign up with the link below on all our podcast providers. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Adventure Island podcast, episode 3. Really getting into the year. I'm Eoghan McCarthy again, and I'm joined by Paul McCabe. So we're kind of hosts week on week, both hailing from Ballyhass Adventure Group, a company that has various different locations offering outdoor experiences in Cork. So if you haven't tuned in, this podcast is all about trying to give a bit of outdoor inspiration and hopefully a bit of entertainment, especially currently in this lockdown 3.0. And this week, if we talk about the news straight off the bat, on the rumor mill, it looks like we're in for another 9 weeks of level 5. So that has me a bit stumped, Paul. How are you feeling about it? Yeah, it's not the news you wanted to wake up to. I'd have to say it's a bit disheartening, to say the least. But we'll see. You know, sometimes these rumors and these leaks are not exactly what comes out in the end. But no, it's a bit doom and gloom at the moment, I have to say.
What do you think? We discussed in our previous episodes about the impact that this COVID lockdown and that kind of stuff are going to have on outdoor sports. And for those who haven't listened, we're predicting obviously that the outdoors are so important, and there's going to be a huge demand for it. But, you know, people's moods are weird at the moment. You know, if we listen back to this in a year, I think it's going to be quite a unique little time capsule to kind of go, what were we thinking? After how long have we been in there now? 12 weeks and another 9 weeks, so we're midway through this lockdown. And like, we're lucky that we can still, you know, we're still working on our products, so we're outdoors. I'm going for a sup around the lake because it's on my doorstep. So, you know, I know we are so much more lucky than most, but it's just a weird vibe we're kind of getting at the moment. Are you finding that, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, I'm finding that too. There is a bit of a demoralizing feeling. And I think a lot of it comes down to people are probably getting a bit fed up of their routine a bit, you know, and then we, with this sort of 5K limit, we're exercising and getting outdoors in the same place, and kind of the lack of variety is maybe what's kind of frustrating people a little bit. And especially, like, we are lucky, we are working away on our products and working away on what we're doing, but it is frustrating in a way for many people who probably are jobless at the moment and their industry is shut down or their job is shut down. So that's probably much more frustrating for other people. So
I think so. And I mean, imagine being in a city center now in an apartment block. That's always, my heart goes out to those people who don't have that aspect. But it's an interesting one. And like, I mean, what we're going to talk about this week, we have a little bit of a content flow. We're going to talk about the news because there have been some really interesting articles from Irish journalists based on tourism this year. There was a really interesting tourism conference last week that we mentioned with the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation. Did a big online tourism and had Fault Ireland and everyone a part of it. So we'll have a little look at that. There's just been some interesting, I guess those two things in particular are interesting in, I think it's echoing the country's mood at the moment. And then we're kind of going to go on to, I guess, some other outdoor articles as well. Because you just said there about, how people are feeling and city center versus countryside. So I think the urban v country feeling here will be an interesting one. I have an article to bring up with you on that. I want to highlight a video that we shared in the newsletter just because it's 30 minutes of adventure gold in my mind. You have an adventure destination, don't you?
Yeah, I'll reveal a really good adventure destination close to my home in County Cavan. But definitely it's one I think would be a good recommendation, especially when we kind of leave these county restrictions and are able to kind of go up the country and see a little bit more.
And I think we'll finish then. We're kind of working on our segments. We're still finding our feet and trying to figure out exactly how these podcasts go. I have an idea for a segment I'm going to run by you right at the end as well, and we'll bring in some of our own travel experiences, which I think will be kind of cool. But let's start off. The first article I wanna talk about is Paul O'Connell. He's a really great Irish tourism focused travel writer. You mentioned Owen Carey as well, actually, like in our talks about this. He be another one, and you mentioned similar to the article I'm just going to bring up now. I thought it was really interesting, and I think they're kind of singing off the same hymn sheet here. Paul's article, and I'll read just a little bit of it. We are not just restricting travel, we are demonizing it, and it will cost us dearly. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs here because I think it's quite interesting, and it sets the tone. Travel used to bring us together. Now it feels like it's tearing us apart. I don't mean the €500 fines and 14-day quarantines. Travel may be connected to a fraction of our outbreaks, but we all know that COVID-19 and its variants didn't blow in with the wind. Now it's not time for holidays. Tough restrictions are necessary, but we are going beyond restricting travel. We are demonizing it. And by obsessing so hard in one area, by continually failing to see it within the context of flawed plans, community transmission, and vaccine delays, we're tying it to fear and panic. We are removing hope for 2021, and we risk deepening COVID's devastation of our holiday and tourism industries. I think he's hitting on something there, Of course, we're this island nation, and it's everyone's just close our borders, stop leaving people travel in. But we need to do commerce. We need to keep a certain aspect of that open. And in the ITIC one, which we'll go on to in a little bit, they said there was a commentary there that says we're not. The comparison between us and Australia and New Zealand isn't a fair one, because we have two countries on the same island. We have borders to respect. But it's still, you can see the commentary, right? And I don't know if you've been seeing this, but I've definitely been seeing it. We're going like, and you're leaving people travel, and you're leaving people in this, and this is the source of the problem. And you can hear me talking about, because this is the way I feel it's being communicated, in really like anger and really, I don't know. I guess it's what Paul is saying is we're demonizing travel. And I'll get your comment on it. But for me, I was actually traveling this time last year, just before the lockdown. I was in Bali, and everyone was freaking out. But when I was traveling through, I felt quite safe, like for me, the airplanes they're one of the only industries that ever thought about a pandemic. Like I think it was US Airlines back at the start of this had thought about pandemics, had come up with plans. And they have air filtration systems. They have all, like, in one sense, for me, flying and the actual act of traveling is not that bad in my mind. Now, I'm not going off anywhere now, and I don't condone it. But does that make sense to you? Like, in my mind, it's just not as bad as people think. The problem is going from hotspot to hotspot, and then what you do when you get there. But the act of traveling itself shouldn't get the bad rep it's getting.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that, because the IITC came out with, I think it was even before the ECDC, the European Disease Central Control. Like before they came out, the IITC said that, brought out this report and kind of showed how safe airlines were in not transmitting the virus around. And it's great, like what you mentioned there about the American Airlines was true. It was nearly like they were prepared for it, especially because airlines travel all over the world. We had the Zika virus, and we had swine flu. So this type of stuff is kind of how they're prepared for it. I definitely think there is a demonization of it, and I think, like, I don't condone traveling now. Absolutely, I agree with you there, but even the implementations of what they're bringing in now in terms of PCR testing 72 hours beforehand, PCR testing after 5 days, and yet travel is still being demonized. So say if I went to, I was coming to Ireland from another country, or I was planning to travel to Spain or travel to Italy, and I did a PCR test and I did my 5-day PCR test after I quarantined, that's still kind of demonized. I feel like you still traveled, you know, that kind of way, even though you're taking a safety, you know, net to ensure that other people don't get sick, and, you know, you don't transmit the virus if you do have it asymptomatically. So I do think there's an absolute demonization of travel in Ireland.
And where is that going to lead to, though? That's the worrying side of things. You know what I mean? And we're an island nation that tourism is a big part of our GDP. And actually, again, I'm taking direct kind of quotes from the ITIC conference now going. It was from the Fall to Ireland director, Paul Kelly. And he was saying, when you look at tourism from a GDP standpoint, you know, like in Ireland, it doesn't necessarily compete, or where it's not the standout one, but where it really benefits the country is jobs, you know, and it has this ability to reach into rural Ireland. I'm almost directly quoting Paul Kelly here now, reaching into rural Ireland, into places that traditional industry just doesn't reach, and provides jobs. And it's 350,000, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the amount that is at peril. And then we as a nation are here demonizing travel, and that's a worrying trend, because then I took a couple of notes down, and the other big one date that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks was, I don't know which one it was said, but when do you foresee tourism returning back to the normal levels? And there was 2029 quoted, you know. That's a decade away, you know, or close to it. And that's a scary thought. But, you know, I mean, maybe we are as a nation getting a little bit better at being realistic, and this 9 weeks that we discussed at the start, extension is probably more realistic than tacking on 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks. So there's something to be said for it, and maybe you can plan around it, but it's still a kind of a worrying trend in my mind of how, and the knock-on effect into other areas. I think Ballyhass is experiencing quite a big one here now, in terms of we've just finished our hiring process, and we have 10 or 12 overseas instructors wanted to come. Actually, probably interview double that of the pool of overseas, and the ones very far away just had no chance of getting here. They looked into visas, they looked into this, into how to apply for a visa, how to get here, and then all the restrictions. There was one candidate from South America, actually really qualified, really passionate, just really wanted to see it. And they had an awful time with the visa office, going like, why would you want to travel here? Why would you even make plans? It was very argumentative, very defensive from our own government. And of course, why would they? We're in the mix of a pandemic, but you also need to plan. They're also saying then we're going to have a staycation nation. But I mean, if we don't have, and this was quite, and this is, I mean, obviously we hire local as much as we can, but this was a very niche sport that isn't quite in Ireland. This is why this candidate was being interviewed. So it was, she was filling a role that we couldn't find in house. So like, I mean, there was a real need for this person, you know. And then so it's the vilifying or the demonizing of the travel. It's not just outbound, inbound. There's bigger knock-on effects, and like you can see it here even directly with our staffing. And then we do have 8-9 more coming in, who now we don't know what the story is with restrictions. Who pays for it? Do we pay for it? Do we help them out? It's a very tricky situation that no one can really, you know. It's just all these knock-on effects are big, you know.
Yeah. And I think this is the key to the conversation. The demonization is causing the negative kind of the negative attitude towards travel returning, because if we had a positive attitude towards travel returning, you know, even, and that's a great example about, you know, international staff, if we were able to encourage them, this is the most safe, effective way to get into the country. Like we've sort of seen Australia, New Zealand kind of start this with essential staff. They're bringing nurses, bringing doctors over from overseas, doing their hotel quarantines, introducing this safe as possible way of bringing international tourists in, or not tourists, sorry, international staff or tourists, and being able to do it completely safely and having that positive attitude towards it. Like, we want people to come in, but they need to do it safely rather than don't travel. I feel that's very negative thought. And what will happen, I think, is when international travel will probably start to return, people just will be afraid to do it because they've heard so much demonization and so much negativity around it that they'll be like, will I go for that holiday in Spain? Oh, I don't know now, because they've been told this, no, don't travel for so long. So I find it very kind of frustrating. Rather, we try and shine a positive light towards it, rather than this negative light that we're getting, you know.
You can hear it from our voices. We, you know, we're almost beaten men talking about this in terms of like, this is how the light is shining on it. But of course, we can't get away from the fact that, look, we're in a very serious position and these are steps that need to be taken. So it's a very difficult, I don't know the solution either, you know. If I was the spokesperson delivering this message, I'm not sure I'd deliver it much differently, but I guess it just is what it is. It's just, what is the knock-on effect of it going to be?
And I think it comes from the worry of what you mentioned about Ireland's tourism and their GDP and what it contributes to it. Like, we are a tourist economy, essentially, really. When you see our summer months, it's when a lot of our GDP is made. So it's more so the worry of it, you know, and what is to come this summer, and, you know, even in 2022, if we can't revive, you know, tourism domestically and internationally. And I think that's what worries us a little bit, even though, like, we respect the, you know, the reasoning behind what's happening at the moment.
Let's look at some, like, there was obviously positives, and there was definitely trying to be positive spins within the ITIC conference as well. There was 2 points that I actually found quite interesting, and I mean, in hindsight, they seem pretty common sense. The one was, who is likely to travel again, and who would those people be, especially just on the back of your comments there, going, oh, you think they're going to be afraid? And I probably would agree with you. But interestingly, from a tourism board point of view, people are going to travel, and this was a takeaway again from the conference, to places they've already been, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because, like, you know, so this is obviously, and they were saying this is based on surveys and this kind of stuff done and research done, but obviously America still sees Ireland as a very viable destination to be number one on the list when international returns, because, and more so to Americans who've been to Ireland before and enjoyed it. They know what they're going to get. They know the standard of living. They know, you know, they've experienced, I guess, the hotel providers and the level that's there. They've experienced how the connections, the airports, all this, and that makes sense. So at least, you know, there's a bit of common sense coming out of it and going, okay, who can we actually target here to get back into Ireland when doable, obviously.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite interesting. The next point was on sustainable travel, and interestingly, and we just had a real quick conversation on it before we came on, but this time last year, or maybe January last time, before COVID was even a mention. And actually, do you know, while we're on this, based out of this one, I'm going to share to the guys who are on YouTube, and I'm going to put a link in the description. I'll just share my screen there, and I'll have it playing back in the background. At this ITIC conference, they basically, I think you can see it there, Paul, can you?
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a video called A Year Like No Other in Review, and it was a year of 2020, and you can see it's just a really well made video that comes across and goes, oh, like, you know, what this actually meant. And they were talking about, you know, in February they were going into these sustainable travel meetings, of which the main issues were over tourism. So can you imagine the difference here now? So going into a meeting in January going, we're in dire straits, the Cliffs of Moher are at capacity, all the major tourism destinations are at capacity. the festival, you know, this was before they
Yeah.
even canceled the St. Patrick's Festival and stuff, to all of a sudden now go the completely opposite direction and have no tourism at all, or just domestic tourism, you know. It's a really interesting time and topic to have such a dire problem that could kill your tourism, or definitely if effective negatively. It'll never kill it outright, obviously, to say that you're too busy. But now to be in a place where they're not expecting any tourism, I thought that point was an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think like even just from my brief experience working in the travel industry in the language, and I remember even trying to book Cliffs of Moher for like groups in February for September or August or September, and it just completely booked out, you know, and like this real suffer of over tourism was like a real concern, whereas it's just amazing now the whole business plan and the whole travel industry's plans and companies' plans that it's just completely flipped on its head, and it's how we're going to sustain a year, you know, with probably limited tourism.
Yeah, watch this. I have this video played in the background, guys. It's the ITIC A Year Like No Other in review, and it's a bit surreal just having it on here in the background, and you see Leo come on with his St. Patrick's Day address, and that language is there behind a tourism backdrop, and even someone at the Cliffs of Moher, I'd imagine, having a similar conversation to what we were saying. But like, again, if you want to watch one tourism video this year, watch it. And it's a bit stark, it's a bit troubling, I guess, especially when we're in the position we are, maybe worse off than we were when this all kicked off, you know. So look, interesting. I think there's some really interesting topics that came out of it. It will definitely be interesting to see. It's kind of like what we've addressed in previous ones, that there's these long-term impacts that we just don't know yet. You know what I mean? We don't know when it's going to bounce back. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's interesting. I think that probably nicely brings us on though to another it's another poll article, actually, a Paul O'Connell article. And it's an interesting one. It's so this summer could see the Nordic concept of free lofts live. Right, it's a very odd spelling one, like, but again, this is on the backs of Forget Hege, which is actually, I had to sorry, no, this is Hygge is how it's pronounced, but it's spelled Hyggge, which is indoor coziness kind of splashed around. It's a Nordic term to this free lofts live, which means the outdoor life. And it's essentially, and actually, do I have, no, I don't have so on a trip to Norway several years ago, I joked about that with some locals in Oslo. As with any urban dwellers, they said most of their week was spent passing other people by. But on weekends, when they hit the trails, slopes, lakes, or parks, that standoff-ishness fell away. Suddenly they started smiling at everyone. And this is pre-COVID, remember? So I think it's a really interesting concept of urban to rural, and the effect that the outdoors has, and how, like, what a different area. And again, in the ITIC conference, they talked about how to address urban tourism, even in the domestic market, and how to encourage it, which will be maybe a tricky scenario when everybody's working from rural, and the rejuvenation of rural towns and how that may impact. But it's a cool little article to say that the Nordics had this word for it, had a whole term about outdoor life. And I think we're really going to see that in terms of, from a COVID impact, going from urban to rural, and how the outdoors are going to impact us in a positive way, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, and I think there's, as we kind of discussed even at the start of the podcast, it's, you know, I do feel for people living in urban areas, especially even in, you know, inner city Dublin there, who like really are cut off from a lot of, you know, the scenic outdoors that, you know, that maybe we're kind of luxured or have a bit of luxury in having, you know, within 5 kilometers of our doorstep, and even within our county when we when we probably go down the levels of restrictions. So I do think that, like, it's a really good element there,
It's cool. It's like there's another good line here. It is passed on through childhoods on ski slopes, friendships forged by cabins and campfires, long summer days interspersed with energizing swims or forest runs. It's a recharge, a blowing away of cobwebs, a reconnection with nature. I love it. I love the sound of that. I mean, like, we've been negative up to this point, but this could be a real massive positive, that we, the issues of traffic and commutes and overpopulations and expensive high-rise apartments might be spread back into the community, and with that additional impact of nature and the outdoors and the connections that it provides, and the reconnections that it will provide this year, when we've been away from our friends and families for so much of this past year and nearly 12 months now. The outdoors will be what reconnects us. And it's just, again, if I'm going to link that article as well. So there's 2 articles there from Paul, who's doing a great job at highlighting tourism and giving a bit of positivity back to go, look, this term and terminology is there, and it's been there, and it's proven, and it's there waiting for us in hopefully 9 weeks. We'll see how it goes. If at the start of May, maybe even a bit sooner. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, no, like, and I think the country's morale will hopefully, I think, like, once, say, even a 5-kilometer restriction is sort of relieved, I think that's the country's morale will start to boost again when they get outdoors and get, on their hikes and their walks, and even hopefully when we have pods of 15 outside, or even people who go out golfing, doing individual sports. That's when we'll see a boost, I think, of morale and just people feeling good again, because I think that's the benefits of the outdoors, isn't it? It's what we want, and what we all strive for is that fresh air, getting outside. That's what we want, and I think that's what the biggest thing we find missing sometimes from what what we're doing at the moment.
We see it. Look, we see it on a day-to-day. That's why we have our values and mission in place, is to get everyone active outdoors, because we see that benefit. And often people take it for granted, but I have a feeling it won't be the case this year. Absolutely. I wanted to go on to a recommendation, a bit entertainment, one that was in the newsletter that was sent out on Thursday this week. It was, again, I'm going to just share my screen here. So for those listening in, it's a video. So it's a GoPro video, chasing adventure with Chris Benchler. So he's a professional skier. This video, right, and I think it's about half an hour long, so it's a GoPro movie. It's found on YouTube. For me, it just encapsulates what I think of a trip, or what I think of the outdoors. Or often you're sitting at home and you're thinking about the outdoors, and I often tell people, it's like when you're having your cup of tea, just stand outside the front door and get some fresh air, get some vitamin D. Like that's the first step into the outdoors. But then obviously you want to step it up, and for me this is really cool. So it's following on this skier. I think it's in Canada, but it's just a multi-adventure trip, and it's really cool video, because we were sharing in our newsletters as well all about this van build community, where these and it's a victim of this urban living, where people are building out vans and living from vans and being this digital nomads. But there's some really, I don't know what it is about it. It's just so engrossing to watch people, how they convert their vans and how they kit it out and stuff. It gives you this wanderlust that you want to get on the road and see it. And it's really cool. So the part of this video has this, but mostly then they go skiing, they go surfing, they go rock climbing. They speak about how the outdoor sports are intertwined, and how that skiing enhances the surfing, and the surfing enhances the rock climbing, because it helps with your concentration. And he goes and meets different people. Now the cinematography, again, you'll see it here on YouTube, it's just mind-blowing. Like, it's so cool to watch. But it's just the vibe of it. It's just so relaxed, so chilled. and it's people doing what they love in nature, and it's where we could aspire to be outdoors. You know, we often talk about how to create an outdoor lifestyle, not just get outdoors, but have a lifestyle where the outdoors isn't something unique or new or anything. It just is. And I think this very much encapsulates that, like, you know. So it really is my highlight video of the year. Whereas if you just watch half an hour, kick back and just watch, you know, you'll be mesmerized by what's happening on the screen. But then just allow you to be taken away to your next holiday, staycation, whatever you want to do, or the next time you do a lap at a block and what you see out there. So that's my big tip this year. But you had an adventure destination in mind, didn't you?
Yeah, so I'll for the people who are on YouTube, or I'll send them there a link to basically what it is. Actually, I think you have me on the I think I'm not a host, so I can't actually share it there.
No worries, I'll get you
but
sorted.
basically my for the people who are listening on the podcast apps, like one of my destination is close to home. I was mentioning as at the start of the podcast. And
I think here we're going to have more recommendations for Cavan on this podcast. I'm going to have to really up my cork on it.
There's a bit of competitiveness, I have to say. But one of a very beautiful location in Cavan is this place called Caboo, and it's set in Killikeen Forest Park, just outside Lochouter. And Lochouter, if you ever look it up on Wikipedia or whatever, if you're looking up an image of it, it's this real sporadic lakes and rivers. Like, it looks like something you'd probably see in a Nordic country. Very sporadic, and a fact of the day is Cavan has 365 lakes, one for every day of the year. So you can imagine.
When you're starting on the board of tourism, Paul.
Yeah, you can imagine. You can imagine they're all so different, but Caboo is this place where they have cabins, basically in Killikeen Forest Park on the kind of banks of Lochouter, and really, really good recommendation. I think it's a fantastic location, and it's something that's really brought tourism, let's say, in Cavan. You know, was something really people did really a lot last summer. So that's one of my adventure recommendations.
The cabins look amazing. Are they? They're so. This is my first time seeing them, so to describe them, they're I suppose that we've talked about Nordic, but that's the kind of Nordic kind of timber wood feel, but really nicely decked out. There's even hot tubs there and stuff, is there?
Yeah, no, it's kind of that sort of getaway, kind of glamping getaway, that you might see similar, kind of just in a lot of glamping pods areas in Ireland. So it's no, it is that kind of cabin area by the woods. But even at that, like, if it wasn't something that you went to and stayed in the cabins, I definitely recommend Killikeen Forest Park and Lochouter. And there's a beautiful castle out on an island there if you're just kind of in the area. But that's my adventure destination of the week anyway.
Are they accessible by kind of, if I brought my stuff up there now or my kayak, can I just readily access the lakes and that kind of stuff? Is that easy, or is it?
Yep. So the lake has a lot of access points from different parts of it. But if you were using, say, if you were staying in Caboo and you wanted to use, say, your own sup or your own, say, kayak, they have no problem with that. That's something that they kind of encourage. That's sort of their niche, as you'd say. They have a supply of boats and sups and kayaks there. But if it's something you want to bring up your own, it's a great place to kind of set up shop. Even if you're not staying there, and if you're getting, say, a B&B or a hotel nearby, you can also lots of different access points on that lake.
Unreal. That is gone right. Cavan for the first time ever has gone straight to the top of my list, Paul. You're doing something right. That's really cool. We definitely want to do those highlight destinations, at least one destination on every podcast. So I think you cover it really nicely there. I have had an idea for a segment, and it's kind of based on maybe something on that video. And I wanted to discuss it with you, but it's that they did an amazing trip, you know what I mean? Or definitely close to expedition type territory, you know? They set out with a goal of trying to accomplish 3 or 4 different sports within their time frame and in their route. They put planning in there. They built the van. They put money behind it. They obviously had filmers and that kind of stuff. So it took quite a lot of planning. And I don't know if it's something that you ever did, but like the idea of a big adventure or expedition really appeals to me. Now, what an adventure or an expedition means in this day and age is an interesting one. And I'll make a recommendation next week on, there's a cool book that I'm reading at the moment that I recommended in the newsletter from Alistair Humphreys. He is. And again, I'll show it next week when we have it. But he just literally highlights all the achievements, the adventure achievements of people. And he kind of categorizes it between manpower, animal power, water, land, this kind of stuff, you know. So there's people who've ridden horses from Russia to Europe, and other people who swam around the UK and obviously did like swimming challenge and stuff. And there's other people again like stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, all these different modes of transport. So it's really interesting to see the breadth of adventures you can have, you know what I mean? So like, has that ever appealed to you, or where in all your travels, where have you felt most adventurous, and has that been in your comfort zone? Have you wanted to push it, or is that enough for you?
Yeah, like I think expeditions are like nearly the ultimate way you can get outdoors in a way. And I like probably one that comes to mind. I was in South Africa a couple of years ago, and you know, the safari is something that people probably consider an expedition, an outdoor adventure, you know, one of kind of the cliche ones, and it definitely is. We went to Pilanesberg National Park. It's very near Johannesburg, on a safari there, and it's just amazing. It's the outdoor feeling when you see animals out in the wild. You feel like you're out on an adventure. You feel like you're outdoors. You're in the wild. You see animals that are in their natural habitat. And we all know, like, we've been to, you know, zoos, and, you know, even in Cork there, FOTA, you know, animals in captivity. But there's a difference of seeing them in the wild. There's an alertness to it, and you feel part of that. You feel like you're in nature with them. So I definitely think expeditions and adventures, adventure expeditions especially, like, are that ultimate outdoor feeling where you're nearly immersed in the wildlife. And that was one thing I found from my experience, one of just example of my experience in traveling, that I found that when you get in one of them expeditions or adventures, or something you're going to plan across one day or 3 days or a week, that's when you really fully immerse yourself in the outdoors. That's kind of where I would see an expedition for me, you know.
Oh, that's really interesting, because like one of the times I felt most out there, most disconnected, most on my own, or away from modern life, was I did a trek in Nepal, the Annapurna circuit. So it was about an 18-day trek, but the animals one, it was an interesting one. So we were 12 days in. And you'd walk through various mountain villages, and they had tea houses and this kind of stuff. And we walked into one afternoon. We were just walking up the road, and you could see at the crest of the hill the next village, and just amazing villages. Locals were there, and they come out, and like old men would be there, like 80, 90-year-old men would be giving you their seat to go, thank you so much for bringing tours. It was just amazing country, amazing experience. As we were coming into a village one day, like it looked as there's just hills everywhere. So like, and there was all kind of hills with a potential crop in it, and you could see it all. The hill was almost moving, and it was almost alive. And as we walked in, this herd of baboons, right? So this herd of monkeys came running towards us, and it was just the most surreal thing going, this was the farmers' ideas of pests in Nepal, like, you know, because not only was a herd of what we saw first was the herd of baboons, but there was 4 or 5 like stressed out farmers with sticks running after them, chasing away the baboons, and they'd obviously ran halfway. And this is horrendous landscape and topography, where they were running across steep hills trying to get this herd. Like, I don't even know if herd is the right name for a group of baboons, but they were chasing them away, and it was so surreal. And then the funny thing about it was that it's so, like, you could see, like, the baboons got to the edge of the village, and then they were quick enough to loop back around the farmers and start all over again. So you could just see the farmers hang their head and then walk back to the start and have to chase them out all over again. And you're in the middle of nowhere watching this hardship that people have to do.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those ones that was incredible. And then I really like your point on the extended period of time. Probably one of my other big adventures was a motorcycle trip through Vietnam. And I did it with 3 or 4 of my buddies, and it was 4 of us in total. And we spent 5 days going through the center of Vietnam. I think it was Da Nang to Hoi An, if I'm not, it was the journey.
Yeah.
But we spent 5 days, and we were on the back of these bikes, and we're going through rural Vietnam. And you know, you go through villages, and these kids would come out and they'd high five you as you're going by, and the excitement. And you go through all these, just, you know, you'd stop off into general day-to-day factories where they're making bricks, or they're working on the rice fields, or harvesting the rice and this kind of stuff on the side. And you were able to stop, and, you know, obviously communication was an issue, but you were able to stop, and they were showing you these things. And it was a real, I don't know how to really describe it, but it really stuck with me as an adventure, you know, because we were there, and we stayed in cities that I don't even, still to this day, don't know where they were, or where they were at that point in the trip, you know. So for me, like, there's definitely an element of getting out there for an extended period of time, getting away from it to a certain degree, getting, like, not out of contact, but those Nepal, at Vietnam, a few other times, maybe New Zealand, and definitely actually in Central America, at times I felt like I was just off the beaten track. And that feeling was amazing. It was amazing. And I think you're chasing the feeling. But then you look at expeditions, and does there have to be an element of hardship? I mean, I bet, like in this book that I'm going to bring up next week, and tune in for that, I'll highlight some of my, you know, I'll actually take a couple of segments out of that book and go, like, this is what people actually have done. And you'll be just amazed what people get up to and how they even think about them. But my takeaway of it is there this element of punishment? And, you know, I think it was Pat Falvey, actually, in one of his books, or I've seen him talk a few times, and he always made the point that Pat Falvey, for those who might not know, he's done a lot of he might have even done the 7 summits. I'm not sure. So one of those big adventure, take 7 highest, or the 7 highest peaks in each of the continents. Yeah. He always made the point that you had to be quite selfish, you know, that these things are just, you're generally training on your own. You're away for weird times. You're away for holidays. You miss birthdays. You miss big life events to achieve these great things. And I wonder, is that an essence of it, or does it have to be that in this modern age? And when my original question was, what defines an adventure or an expedition in this day and age? And I'm not sure what does do that, you know?
Well, I liked your concept there of the feeling, and I think the feeling is different for everyone. I think someone could feel the expedition adventure by just going out for 2 hours on a kayak, or, you know, or even just going out for an hour on a sup. And I think everyone's different in what they feel is their expedited adventure, if that's a word, if the first word is a word. But
that's the title of your autobiography there in 20 years, Paul. Expedited expeditions.
Yeah, like, and I think now what I like about it, and bring it back to Ireland now, and, you know what, I think we're rediscovering that a little bit, because even even with we talked about van life, and even people just driving around different parts of Ireland doing the Wild Atlantic Way, for example. Like, these things are things that people are starting to do and learn, and it's a bit of an expedition for them. Like, I remember when I did the van life when I was in Japan, and I remember, although I don't advocate unsafe travel, but I advocate, like, there's a bit of spontaneity in your traveling, you know, where you go, let's go up here and see what happens today. And there's a little bit of that, I think, in what's happening even in Ireland today, that people are, well, we'll go down to Wexford, or we'll go down to Galway, we'll stay in this place, but we'll explore around us. And, like, even there, mentioning the Cavan location there, like, a lot of people probably never heard of that place. And I think that's it's what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get back to, is this feeling of what you feel that's an expedition adventure for you. And I think that's what we want to kind of encourage out of people, that try new things, and, you know, don't always immerse yourself in what's going on in the news and technology. Put that away, get outdoors and have a look at, see what's available. And I think that's a good way of maybe exploring yourself in that way.
I'm going to give a great recommendation right on the back of that exact what your take on that. Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. It's a small little kind of, I would almost classify it as a manual on how to travel, but like you said, advocating irresponsible travel, and it's not that, but he definitely advocates getting lost. You know, he goes, take the road, just take there and sit down in that local square and just absorb it. And he gives this incredible, and it's a famous kind of travel journal, really, like modern enough, but it's definitely 20 years old now. I took a lot out of it when I was traveling to go. There's a difference between holidays and travel, you know, and you know, if you've ever talked to a gap year traveler, they'll wax lyrical about. I think it was in Inbetweeners did it really well, actually. That you know, yeah. So where they're all just singing and you're rolling your eyes at them, but on the other side of that, I think Rolf Potts and Vagabonding captures it, you know, and it having the time to get lost is a unique thing nowadays. You know what I mean? You go on holidays, you take 2 weeks off, you've got 14 days to get as much in as possible. Whereas vagabonding is all about having that time to experience that local, whatever you come across, you know. Do it sensibly, do it safely, but you know, he gives very practical tips on how to do it, and I'll put a link to that book down below. But to finish off, right, that was, you know, we went on a bit of a segue there, but I would like to highlight maybe, so we have an adventure destination of the week, which you did really well this year, or this week. I would like to do kind of maybe highlight an adventurer or an expedition, and I think we can do a bit of research on that and come up with I think it would be kind of really cool stories to so we have our stories based on the newsletter should be giving you a good bit of entertainment and entertainment ideas based on the outdoors. Our adventure destinations hopefully will get you planning, get you thinking, and get you out there. Especially, we'll keep them the majority of them domestic this year for obvious reasons. And I think maybe adventurer, because there has been some great Irish ones, expeditions, highlighted them. Hell, it might give us a bit of inspiration, Paul, to plan our own. But absolutely, for the moment, let's just see what's involved. Let's highlight some cool ones, and there's some great documentaries and stuff out there of other ones. So I reckon, will we try that for next week?
Yep, sounds good. And I think definitely it'll get us planning, and hopefully we'll get the listeners planning as well.
Yeah, and that's what the Adventure Island is all about, guys. We think Ireland is home of adventure for us, and you may never have to leave the island, and you'll have a great adventure. But for those of you who have your sights set on further afield, let's try and help you out with that. But I think we'll finish up for today. It was an interesting. I think you probably heard our disappointment of recent announcements this week at the potential of another 9 weeks, but some really interesting journalism coming out of it, really interesting talking points coming out of those announcements that we'll keep you up to date on, that we're obviously looking quite closely at for work. But again, look, the outdoors is where it's at. It's the outdoor nation. It's the buzz topics of the week. So stick with us, and we'll keep the recommendations, the entertainment, and hopefully the inspiration coming. Thanks very much, guys.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.